believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Brandes, also known as Rick Brandes, and a great episode for you today. Today we have returning guest Mel K. I'm so glad I'm catching up with releasing these shows. This show was recorded a week or two ago. I went away for a week to a overnight soccer camp I coach at, and I bring my son with me, and it basically takes up your whole week. For 1 week straight, these kids get to live like a professional soccer player. They all eat together at the cafeteria. They go to the field. They get trained. They go back to the cafeteria for lunch, get trained after that, go to dinner, then do a last session at the end of the night. And then after everything is said and done and laundry is in, we do karaoke or a talent show or have a musician come. It's called Amaral Soccer Academy. You can find it online. If you follow me on social media, I'm sure you've seen some videos from the camp. And I never take for granted the opportunity to be a part of some young people's journey, to talk with them, to connect with them. Something I kept saying during the soccer camp was that I don't believe a lot of kids have mentors or people they can go to, just people who listen to them if they just want to share their thoughts, their passions, what drives them, their life journey, their life story. One night, I was supposed to do room checks. And instead of getting the kids in the rooms at 10 p.m., a bunch of them were in the lobby. I end up talking to them. We end up just sharing our personal stories, our opinions on diet, nutrition, training, sports. Then we got into some science and just the nature of the world and universe and religion and spirituality and all these really fun, interesting topics. And next thing you know, it was past 11 o'clock. But it's those type of experiences I really enjoy. But nonetheless, back to my point, I'm a little off track. My point is, this camp takes up a lot of my time for that 1 week out of July. So a lot of these shows are a week or two old, which usually isn't a big deal. But the problem is, after the attempted Trump assassination, anything that happened before that seems a little outdated because so much has happened since then. Today, July 21st, Biden drops out, and now I believe Harris is running. So there's a lot going on, and a lot going on quickly. We also just had a recent Union of the Unwanted, which was on the 15th. It was a couple days after the attempted assassination. That was a great discussion with a bunch of researchers, as always, sharing their thoughts and opinions on what's going on. But like I said, a lot going on quickly. Now, all the shows you hear after this one will be post that assassination attempt, post Biden dropping out. So hopefully, if you're looking for more of my opinions on those subjects and topics, you'll hear more of that in shows to come. So tons of great shows already booked and looking forward to recording and releasing. And I'll have a little bit more time now that the camp is behind me. By the way, Element Electrolytes also sponsor the camp. We always have tons of issues with kids being dehydrated and passing out because obviously July is very warm and we're on turf all day and sometimes they forget to drink and kids will pass out. So having Element Electrolytes available everywhere for the coaches and the players, the campers, so they can stay hydrated. They don't have to drink as much water because the electrolytes are helping you hold on to that moisture and getting the hydration into your muscles so you don't sweat it out as quickly. It went a long way in helping everybody. And also, it helped us with energy, with headaches that you get when you're dehydrated, all those symptoms that come from dehydration, cramping, obviously, muscle fatigue. So it was a huge help. I can't thank Rob Wolf and the Element Electrolyte team enough for helping all of us get through these very hot weeks of the camp. I think I made everyone at that camp a fan of the product. if you're an athlete and you're sweating a lot, there's no product better than Element Electrolytes in regards to making sure you hold on to the moisture and prevent you from cramping and really optimizing your performance. Back to my guest. If you guys aren't familiar with Mel K, like I said in the beginning of the intro, she is a returning guest and she's also a regular on the Union of the Unwanted. But if you're not familiar with her, please check out her show. All the links are in the show description. She has amazing guests on, whistleblowers, researchers. She does geopolitical issues, historical events. She covers everything and anything. So really fun. She's a ball of energy, and her passion to try to help people and help this country is second to none. So I know you guys are going to enjoy the show. And if you do enjoy the show and you can financially support the show, please consider doing so. Go in the show description. Go to our sponsors. Element Electrolytes is one of them. Check out our sponsors if you want to support the show. You can also send a one-time donation via Venmo, PayPal. You can support us monthly on Patreon with as little as $1 a month. And if a small percentage of the people who listen and watch to the Ripple Effect podcast donated as little as $1 a month, I could easily do this show full time. So please, you don't have to donate a lot. And everybody who does donate anything, it's much appreciated. We also have a merch store. Get some merch. Wear some Ripple Effect podcast gear. We have cool designs, cool colors, and it's definitely a conversation starter. And who knows, you'll be at a soccer camp like I was, or you'll be at the gym or at a show, or you'll be at a barbecue. Wherever you are, having a podcast shirt will definitely spark a conversation. People will ask you about that podcast, and hopefully you guys will end up having a deep, thought-provoking conversation about the topics we talk about on the show. So that's it, guys. Support the show if you can. Of course, it's a value for value show. If you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. Rate the show, review the show. My show's open source, so post the show anywhere you would like and just get the word out there, because obviously we're all being censored in the alternative media. So any help to fight against the algorithms that are censoring us is much appreciated. Thanks, guys. Enjoy this conversation, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.
What exactly has happened to our country. It is, in my opinion, we are captured basically by a global public-private partnership that is running America as if it's a parent company above our government. And I come to this conclusion unhappily, but honestly, because where we are right now is that I believe not only, as you know, Charlie's a good friend of both of ours, and he wrote that book, Controlled Demolition of America. But what is happening also is a liquidation of America on a massive scale. And it appears to me that Larry Fink, who runs BlackRock, is probably the most powerful person in America right now behind the scenes of the Biden regime, but also still really pushing his position at the World Economic Forum as the board member there that is pushing ESG scores and the Great Reset, also on the board of the Council of Foreign Relations, which is behind much of what's going on. And then on top of that, you know, BlackRock is using U.S. taxpayer money, basically in the form of pensions, public and private, and funding a lot of Chinese Communist Party companies that have to do with military and also EVs and all of that. And you have to wonder, after what we dealt with Anthony Fauci and NIH and DOD funding research at a military lab in communist China to create the COVID operation, you have to wonder, you know, where's the loyalty lie? And it certainly doesn't lie with the American people or what is happening in America. And frankly, I think a lot of what's happening is people are realizing, you know, Joe Biden's not running the country. Who's running the country? Well, I believe that it's the global public-private partnership that is basically above many of our nations, as Klaus Schwab told us about his infiltration into cabinets, including in Canada and in the UK and France and Germany and America. I think we're watching that. We're watching the end game of either they're going to get their Agenda 2030 by 2030, or we are going to have to step up and say that we don't want that, we don't consent, and we're not going to sign on to that, because Agenda 2030 it generally is about the transfer of all wealth, resources, surveillance, all of that to a unaccountable globalist oligarchy, basically, that would run it from the top down. They don't hide it on their own paperwork. And frankly, the Biden regime put out in September of 2023 an entire document on their commitment to global goals. And basically, Joe Biden said in this document, that Barack Obama signed us on for Agenda 2030 in 2015, and in his next term, he's going to accomplish it. Yet nobody's asking Joe Biden about the issues upcoming. All we're talking about is his, dementia or whatever. But the truth is, there are really serious issues facing this country. And if we're going to remain the country as founded with a constitution and a bill of rights and borders and people having a say in what's happening in our government, certainly the Agenda 2030 global governance model is not what the future should look like for America, for the majority, I believe, of America, but they don't even know it's happening because nobody's talking about it.
And predictions are fun. So I'd like to get some predictions about what you think might happen because again, it seems like everything's unraveling. Like there are these agendas. We obviously know the direction they're trying to nudge us in, but at the moment, it kind of seems optimistic from our standpoint because you can't deny that the president's not running things. You can't even
Right.
deny that he's coherent. So it's just one of those things where people seem to be waking up. Just recently, people like James Corbett was on Jimmy Dore. I've had both of them on my show years ago, but I remember when I had Jimmy Dore on my show way back in the day. I think it was right after he left TYT or somewhere
Wow.
around those lines. And I mean, I didn't even get into any really conspiratorial topics because I knew it was stuff that he wasn't that interested in or he might end up just being turned off by. And now he has James Corbett on and they're doing segments on 9/11. And it's like, it's crazy to believe that people in the mainstream or people who more or less, you would never kind of lump in the conspiratorial world are now completely accepting these notions that were considered conspiracy theories as basically, historical events and
Yeah.
that we've been lied to about a lot of these things. So what's your predict? Because to me, I'm a little nervous that something's gonna happen. Like they're not just gonna lose without fighting, right? And
Right.
so do you have a prediction on what might happen? Is there going to be some October surprise? Is there going to be something big or am I just or are they just losing and there's not much they can do?
No, I think there's a lot they can do. They do control the money supply. They do obviously control what's going on in all the wars around the country, around the world. I mean, are funded by the same people on both sides. They have been for a very long time. If we cut off the money, it wouldn't be happening. But apparently, we can't do that. I also think the narrative about Ukraine is much more mainstream in terms of what actually happened in 2014. And also that most of Ukraine's farmland, resources, everything else have been pillaged and stolen from that country anyway. So what does victory look like really? On top of that, we have everything going on in Gaza and Israel, which we're obviously not getting the truth about. And the media has really dropped the ball on every story going on. There's all kinds of uprisings in Africa and elsewhere that, it's a time where I believe that they are funding order out of chaos, or that's what their end goal would be. Yeah, I think something's going to happen. I mean, really, really important for people, I think, to understand is like, Trump sometimes says they're not after me, they're after you, and I'm in the way. But I keep telling people they're not after America, they're after the world, and America is in the way. And in many ways, as much as they want to divide us left and right, gay and straight, Republican, Democrat, it's all a farce. Really, we are all in the same position. We're all being looted, and not just looted, but I mean, when they're talking about sending our kids to a war that never should have happened, could have been negotiated in the first month. Boris Johnson went over there famously and said, don't negotiate. We're going to keep it going, when both sides at that time were actually at the table. So the endless war model, I think, has also been really exposed as people looking back and thinking, well, what did we gain from any of these wars? And what were these wars really about? I mean, you and I think when we talked before, we talked about Wesley Clark when he came out and said that Rumsfeld said, we're going into all these countries. And he was like, why? That has, and now we know why, because they wanted to keep power by any means necessary. And a lot of that power had to do with controlling the financial sector through the IMF and other tools that they have to kind of manipulate the world into following down this path of developing nations and we got to help everyone and all of that. Now we realize it's really a lot of it, including the World Health Organization, UNESCO, Some of the other things are huge transfers of wealth that go missing, and they never end up helping anyone. They're never developing those nations. And if they can't get their way, it's very clear that we have been funding and um, interfering in foreign politics by creating color revolutions with National Demo for Democracy, USAID, enforcing or imposing our will on foreign sovereign nations, which has to stop. And the scariest part is, I believe that with BlackRock being so influential over what is happening in this country, in my opinion, and then you pull in all the other players in Washington, D.C., who seem to have zero power. We have to kind of analyze our relationship with the government and what really happened here. And for me, the most disturbing part of all of this is that I frankly believe that the Patriot Act needs to be repealed. Because when I look at the big picture of everything, the scariest thing of them all is the privacy issue, the data collection issue, the manipulation online, which is also part of that. But all of the agencies that came out of the Patriot Act, DHS, DNI, TSA, all of them basically, they are their own branch of government, which never should have existed. And they have unlimited ability to open a file on, clearly at this point, certainly after Obama Holder, on anyone in America that they suggest is a domestic terrorist, a threat to national security, just from what you're writing online. I had on two former FBI agents that basically told me they were both in New York at 9/11, promoted to that sector. But what's happened with the Patriot Act is it's been weaponized against anyone that goes against the regime in power by design. And all of those agencies have no oversight. And I don't know if you saw it, Tucker just recently was doing an interview, and I think it was with Ron Paul even, and he said that the government, the three branches of government that were actually supposed to be running this country with checks and balances, are completely captured and terrified of the intelligence branch, the intelligence community, mainly because they have no oversight, and the only people that really know what's going on there are the Select Committee for Intelligence in the Senate. But beyond that, they have teamed up with what Holder and Obama created in the Department of Justice, the National Security Division, to be kind of the prosecution, persecution, lawfare arm of that DHS kind of domestic terrorists is our problem, overseas, take your eyes off that. So I think the people in America have to realize we're all equally being violated in terms of privacy, data. Now a lot of people have put in the Internet of Body, Internet of Things, surveillance systems through contracts, small and large, all over the country. And I agreed to give the government my license, my birth certificate, and my social security card, but they're not entitled to anything else from any of us. And we've gotten to a place where they've gotten so, underhanded that they're they're re-upping the 702 warrantless surveillance. And frankly, the NSA has relationships with all the Five Eyes nations. So what I found is if they can't spy on you directly or with their partners in big tech, they'll go to a foreign country and have the foreign country do it so that they avoid, getting caught. And a lot of this goes back to, quite frankly, Crossfire Hurricane, nothing to do with Trump, just to do with what this group of people did to this country by concocting and creating the impetus for Crossfire Hurricane, and frankly, straight through. And none of them have been held accountable. Many of them committed sedition and treason. Whether you like Trump or not, it doesn't mean that what happened during his term, especially from the intelligence community, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, and all of them, should go with a pass. It's not about that. It's really about creating the precedents that in America, you no longer have liberty or personal privacy, or, the Fourth Amendment isn't even kind of considered at this point. We've seen enough with the morning raids of people that didn't go in the Capitol on January 6th. So to me right now, I feel like the American people are at a precipice of either they want this country to continue down the path that it was built on, or they're going to accept a global governance model based on global track and trace surveillance with central bank digital currency, World Health Organization, climate pass, all this crazy stuff they've already, basically have to roll out. The one thing that's missing right now, I believe, is the American people. And that, is really why I'm glad to hear about Jimmy and other people talking about it, because we are really dealing with either we will remain America, or frankly, I think we will turn into a cog in a globalist wheel that looks very much like Hunger Games. And I can't even, I look at Pan Am and Hunger Games and how they set it up. And if you read their documents, which I do read, it very much sounds like exactly that. And the whole goal is because the wards, of course, make it much easier to control the population that way. And they've gone through going direct, as Larry Fink would call it. The banks and the corporations have certainly since Black Lives Matter, taken over the role of forcing behavior change and all of this stuff with the different ESG and CRT and DEI. I mean, all of this is bad for our country, and I think most people know that. But between now and then, they're going to try to keep power, and it makes them very dangerous, especially with the wide open border and the denial that there's an actual problem there.
Yeah, I mean, what's concerning, like the Patriot Act, obviously is a big deal, but I don't think they even needed it to spy on us, anyways. I mean, Thomas Drake,
Right.
he's been on the show. I'm sure you're
Yeah.
familiar with him and others that whistleblow. There's actually, believe it or not, a pretty good PBS documentary, frontline documentary called "The United States of Secrets,"
Yeah.
and it goes into 9/11 and how they used what happened on 9/11 to just ramp up and justify even more spying. But a lot of these are also contractors, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
um, Edward Snowden worked for Booz Allen, I believe.
Right.
He didn't
Yeah.
even work directly with the NSA. And I mean, if you hear about the access he had to everybody's personal information, and to think that just a typical civilian, employee had all that access to everybody's personal information with no oversight, it's absolutely insane. And what you're saying about the FBI, CIA, all these branches, that is what's scary about them, is the fact that there is no oversight. There's a black budget. They have money. They have all these operations. People aren't even familiar with what's going on in their own departments because there's so much secrecy and whatnot. So there is nobody to control them. And when you're the president and they know you're going to be in office for, minimum 4 years, maximum 8 years, they don't take you seriously. They don't care what you want because you're going to be long gone, and there's going to be these people who've been around and making connections and networking and have friends and do favors for people and are owed favors that are really pulling the strings. I mean, historically, you look at some of the political consultants and whatnot, it's the same faces, same people,
Right.
same lobbyists who are circulating around, the politicians and influencing them in one direction or another. So, it really is insane to think that a president who's only in power for 4 years actually is given any real power, because the truth is they're not. I remember when I had Jesse Ventura on, he talked about when he became the first independent governor of Minnesota, how exactly what he wanted to do was remove all these like ridiculous laws.
Right.
He's like, he was looking at all the law. He's like, this is ridiculous. Why are there so many rules and laws? He's like, this is insane. He's like, every year, he's like, I'm gonna get one removed, and the one of his consultants are like, that's never going to happen. You know how much
Right.
work it is to, once something is established, to get these laws off the books. And the thing is, the more complex the law system is, the more we can be taken advantage of, because they can prosecute us for one thing, or
Yeah.
and once you're on the radar, you can get locked up for any. I mean, look at Assange, who
Right.
finally got out
Yeah.
and whatnot. But there's so much going on. I mean, when you look at, you brought up we briefly brought up 9/11, which it's been now some more. Speaking of mainstream of YouTube channels, Breaking Points is now talking about the Saudi connection to 9/11.
Right.
And it does seem coincidental that the petrodollar is no more, and now we're like okay with throwing Saudi under the bus. So it's like there's all these things going on behind the scenes, and all these really interesting, just stories and layers to keep up with. Um, when you're looking into the future, I mean, are you optimistic? Do you feel like things are trending in the right direction, or are you concerned? Because I do feel like America is the final barrier to get by. And I remember during COVID, I'm sure you had similar feedback where people would be like, "Hey, if America falls, we all fall. If America battles,
Yeah.
we all battle." And it almost seems like that spirit of what this country was founded on, of like trying to get their independence from the European royal family, and just trying to start a new thing and experiment by trying to create a system that can bypass some of those issues that causes corruption and whatnot. Are you optimistic? Do you think America will end up trending in the right direction, doing what's right, and I guess, for lack of better terms, saving us all?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I hope so, but honestly, it is up to the American people. I mean, people all over the world are rising up, and we are less than others, and it shouldn't be that way. I believe if January 6th didn't happen and a bunch of the other things the last few years, there would be hundreds of thousands of people in DC against the war like there were with Iraq or Vietnam, and that's not happening, and that's a real sign of something in our country is wrong. I believe that has a lot to do with the intelligence branch and the unfettered spying and what we saw after January 6th, which was, a handful of bad actors, but a lot of people that didn't do anything wrong or certainly didn't know they were imprisoned, their lives destroyed, put on domestic terror lists for life. Or at least until the next presidency. So it's alarming to me that people are still afraid to gather. It seems for positive things, which I hope will change. I know there's an event coming up in September that I talked to Scott Ritter about and some other people. That's to end the wars, and I know they tried before, but that should be first and foremost. I am optimistic only because, like you, I've been all over the country, and most people are past the point of the fraud that is that there's a right and left, a Republican and Democrat. Most people I speak to just know that the entire Washington, D.C. is corrupt to the core. And I think the real important thing to realize is that I have a book coming out called Americans Anonymous, Restoring Power to the People, One Citizen at a Time, where I kind of go through our history, but also a lot of other thinkers about personal individual liberty, individual responsibility, what a citizen of this country owes to not just this country, but to the future generations as being lucky enough to be a citizen in America, and that we've shirked the duty, that it's really us. And I think we need to have a full reorganization and a kind of grassroots up reconfiguring of our relationship with the federal government at all. Because frankly, there's been a lot of decisions lately, really good ones, I think. Chevron decision, the SEC decision, the EPA decision. A lot of these are very much about going back to the Constitution. Not only should these agencies not exist as per the Constitution, but a lot of these things should go back to the states. And besides that, you brought up also, until we deal with lobbying, which is legalized bribery, which is the biggest theft of our voices and our votes, lobbying should be totally illegal. I think all these people proved during COVID, they don't need to be in DC. It's just a cesspool of corruption. I think that we should have a thing where the senators and the Congress people serve where their constituents are, and not everyone doesn't move to the club in DC. Frankly, we have a bunch of NGOs run by the globalist billionaires running the controlled demolition of America that pretend to be for HRC is for the LGBTQ plus, or the BLM is for the Black Lives Matter or whatever. But if you really dig down deep, this is really just dividing us from inside, divide and conquer. So NGOs certainly should be looked at, but shouldn't have tax exempt status when they're being funded by Omidyar, Reid Hoffman, and Soros. And then they get a tax exemption for the money that they put in there, and then they have all these dark laundering things on both sides. There are no sides, in my opinion, but like Arabella Partners, New Venture Fund, Tides, money goes in there, and then they spread it out where they want. Act Blue, a lot of the money for BLM that went through Black Act Blue went to get Joe Biden elected, not to help the Black community. So there's so many of these core things, but it's really going to have to be the people realizing this is why the news is complicit, and I believe guilty of crimes in the past several years, because especially the 51 intelligence agents, 5 former CIA heads signed a letter saying that Hunter Biden's laptop was fake when they knew it was real since 2019. I mean, that was a total fraud on the people, regardless of what you think of the 2020 election, and nothing happened to them. So again, we keep having these things going all the way back, frankly, to the murder of JFK forward, as seems to have been, like you said, one cover up after another cover up, but the people in the background don't change. Only the forward facing people change, which is why Trump wanted to put in Schedule F. And I hope that he does if he gets in there, because we shouldn't have bureaucrats that we don't know who they are deciding anything in this country. That's just not how it's set up. And the way that it was set up, which is much more simple and less complex, and a lot more goes back to the people in the states. Because these people that get upset about Dobbs or any other decision because it went back to the states, that is how it gets closer to the people. And so to me, I think we have to reconfigure our own relationship with the government from the top. You brought up the Declaration of Independence. If you read that right now, from 1776, why they declared their independence, you're going to see that every single one of those things is an issue right now. We're very much in the same position, just this time it's not England or Germany or France. It is actually a global public-private partnership of multinational people that I believe have no allegiance or alliance to any nation, to any flag, to any people, to any religion, to anything. Is truly, in my estimation, power for power's sake. And if they can control everything and put it into the buckets that they created as the tentacles of the UN, they believe that they will finally get their one world government. You know, it seems like they also need a war every time. So World War I, they tried to put in the League of Nations, which was clearly a world government. World War II, we got the UN. World War III looks like they want UN 2.0 with technocracy and totalitarian surveillance on a global scale. So again, I think we're dealing with the same people with the same model that they keep rebuilding. The scary part is right now they actually have the technology to turn the switch and turn us into Hunger Games. So we have to be really proactive. But as you know, the censorship is heating up again. I saw X teamed up with something I've warned about, GARM, which is a World Economic Forum, basically censorship, trusted sources censorship model. And you know, when you see that on that X has joined the World Economic Forum censorship and disinformation index, then you think, oh really? So it's not really a free speech platform, is it? Which it's not. But again, I just think that it's the people of this country that have to understand the stakes we face, because you don't want your children, and I certainly don't want mine, fighting wars that they shouldn't be in, but also pillaging their future. I mean, I've driven all over this country. The amount of empty farmland, like just abandoned towns, full abandoned towns with like buildings and main streets and factories just abandoned. All of our money should be going into rebuilding America from within. And frankly, there's 2.1 million federal employees. You know, get rid of 75% of them, send them back to the private sector to help rebuild this country from within, and we got a shot. But if we keep going down this path, you know, especially with the BRICS nations and I believe our government, the UK and the Five Eyes nations, isolating us financially, militarily, in terms of travel and communication. It's really that they are under the guise of, you know, hurting Russia or whatever. What they've done is really, really hurt the United States, or the people of the United States on a grand scale. And they're building a wall around us. It's not the opposite. The rest of the world, and honestly, I honestly believe that Donald Trump is the only person that could come in and still sit down with Xi and Putin and Kim and all of them. But you know, they're done with Blinken and Sullivan and you know, Biden and this whole Kagan, the whole neocon world. It's like they've betrayed the trust of many treaties, including the Minsk Accords. They've weaponized finances to a point where war is fought by, you know, sanctions. And, you know, they've just failed. The entire project for a new American century is a failure. And, you know, we should be competing against the Belt and Road Initiative by, you know, helping other countries by also, you know, providing them with transportation, with electricity, with internet, with energy, with education. Because while China went and been doing that since 2000, we've been militarizing the world and forcing USAID and other, I believe, far left or Marxist unwanted culture into foreign nations without, for billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. The USAID should be totally audited. So should National Endowment for Democracy. But why are we doing that in foreign countries and not even doing it here? So I just really think that it's the people of the United States sitting on, you know, their couches, and it's hard raising kids and a life and everything, but we have a responsibility to those kids to see that whatever's going on in Washington, D.C. is fully and totally, I believe, broken. I don't think that they can gain back the trust on any level And frankly, it doesn't matter who the president is. We can't vote our way out of where we are now. We can only change it by changing it in our sphere of influence and not being afraid to get involved because, they've created a politics, even on the school board level, that's like gladiator, and you have to like, I'm going to throw my whole family. They're going to destroy my home, my family, my reputation. It's like, that's not what politics should be about. Also Citizens United should go. We just got to separate the money out of politics, Wall Street out of DC, and the military industrial complex needs to be reined in. And again, that's only going to come from the people actually demanding it, I believe, locally, but certainly in the states. My only hope for America, quite honestly, is in the states and in really governors that realize that they can work together and form an alliance to fight a lot of this stuff. It's happening very late now, but there's a lot of attorney generals that have been getting together on different topics, 19, 26, whatever. And that's really how we're going to have to do it. But without the people getting involved actively, it's just going to keep going down a path, and we'll wake up one day and they'll flip the switch and we will be in Hunger Games.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's still people who fall for the trick over and over again. You know, that quote, it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked. And
Yeah.
it's always surprising to me how quickly some people buy the next lie, right? It's like we know Iraq wasn't that long ago, Afghanistan wasn't that long ago. Then Ukraine comes and everybody's on board and waving Ukrainian flags, and there's people who cannot are living paycheck to paycheck who couldn't deal with a $500 emergency right now, and
Right.
yet we accidentally send money. I forget how many billions of dollars we like sent over there accidentally. That would like it was I don't know how do you even define that? How do you accidentally transfer billions of dollars, and who got that money? But and it becomes a money laundering scheme where
Yeah.
the money's going to Ukraine. Ukraine has to buy U.S. military weapons from our contractors. So the money's going right back to their buddies, those lobbyists that you're referring to. And it just is a vicious cycle. And that's the thing. Like, that's why the way that the U.S. was supposed to work with having states have most of the power and authority over, their people and their state, it makes more sense because the federal government's too big, has too much power, and it's just too easily corrupted. And when you go back to, like you said, from JFK forward, I mean, it's conspiracy after conspiracy after conspiracy. I mean, and all the same, like we're talking about all the same characters. I mean, Bush Sr. was involved with the JFK assassination. You had Allen Dulles, who had the CIA, obviously was a part of the Bay of Pigs, and then next thing you know, he's put on the Warren Commission, even though he was fought for the Bay of Pigs. His brother was involved with the United Fruit Company. I mean, it was just like, which was involved with all these coups and Guatemala and whatnot. So it's like, it's just similar people, similar faces, and it's nonstop, and it's our money, and that's the thing that drives me nuts. Is like there are people struggling day to day, and yet we're sending $700 to people in Hawaii, which is a actual territory of the U.S., and yet we're just recklessly throwing money away to conflicts that we shouldn't even be involved in. And some people will argue that the Ukraine conflict is justified in regards to the Russians' perspective, because they have to look after themselves, and when we keep expanding east, that we would do the same thing if we're in those shoes. And I think it's much deeper than that. I think with Russia, there is something about their pushback to Western ideology. They still have some religious and spiritual worldviews and perspective on things, and they're one of the European countries that have pushed back. When a lot of France, Portugal, Spain have become kind of infiltrated by this Western ideology and modernity and all this type of stuff, where they seem to push back a little bit. And I wonder if that's also a big part of our dislike of the country. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts on Russia in particular is first, the lie that has been repeated over and over that Vladimir Putin would be going back into the rest of Europe and try to reestablish the USSR, no matter how many times Rand and everyone else says that's true. It actually is not true, and he doesn't even want to do that. And frankly, just in the past 2 weeks, so Putin is meeting right now with Modi. He's met with North Korea. He's met with leaders all over the world. Certainly, he is replacing us in certain places in France. I mean, not in France, in Africa. He's replacing France in a lot of places in Africa. And they're working very closely with the Chinese, but also there's been a concerted effort to keep Russia at loggerheads with Germany, which way back when, even Brzezinski said the worst thing that could happen is Germany and Russia having a relationship. I mean, a lot of this stuff goes back to Brzezinski and Kissinger and Rockefeller and the Crown and everything that they created, and the going in after the fall of the USSR with the borders and the oligarchs and the money laundering and so much of that stuff. But also, we have to remember that these were some arbitrary borders that were created, but there is an entire group of people that live in the Ukraine side that are Russian at heart. And they've been treated terribly since 2014, if not before. And they voted in a legit election recognized by the UN to be part of Russia, and that should be negotiated. But the fact that nobody's talking about peace and yet they're escalating the concept that we might have limited nuclear strikes should strike us that we're like in Dr. Strangelove. There should be no reason on planet Earth to have war at all right now based on territory. There's plenty of land, just negotiate it like detente, like it used to happen. But Joe Biden hasn't even spoken to Vladimir Putin in 3 years. I mean, how do you do that? So there's no interest in negotiations. Like I said, they thwarted an early negotiation set up by Turkey, the Istanbul memo, which was pretty in depth, and both sides kind of seemed okay. Boris Johnson put the kibosh on it. They had a phony peace conference, which I thought was weird that Larry Fink was there. I follow him around, see what he's doing. But at this peace conference that they called NATO nations, they didn't invite Russia. That's not how you do it. And I mean, we're at a place where most of the world decided that they were not on our side in this. So you can force all these NATO nations, but the NATO nations feel just like the people in the United States. We don't want our kids going to war. And frankly, they just exterminated 2 generations of male Ukrainians, basically. Anyone that they could find, they threw into this hellscape. And there's plenty of room to negotiate, honestly. And if it was not for the military industrial complex, the US, UK, NATO alliance, this war would have been over. And frankly, that is really the position that we need to all kind of look at is, why is nobody talking about peace at all? And the reason is, I believe, multiple layers. But I think they're also waiting until after the US 2024 election. And it has very big stakes, not just for America, but for the world. But when you see Vladimir Putin up there on stage 2 days ago and saying he's going to wait because he thinks Trump will negotiate to end the war, and he thinks he's sincere about that. And then we're hearing other people, other world leaders talk about their, what we're getting from Foreign Affairs and the CFR and all the mainstream media is the rest of all of Europe and all the world is panicking because Trump might end NATO. But honestly, from most of the world that's not involved in NATO, they can't wait for that. So, we need somebody to negotiate peace. Peace is totally possible and should be able to be had. But frankly, as long as the global public-private partnership sees a benefit of continuing these wars, they'll continue, because they are not about the people. They are not really about land. They are really about resources, in my opinion. And these trade routes that they've created with the Belt and Road Initiative and other things, it just kind of all overlaps. But at the end of the day, it's got very little to do with peace or humanity or prosperity for the people. It has a lot to do with this small group of people that truly want to have total control. So again, I feel that we have to be as loud and honest as we can, because I also believe there's a big push of censorship coming up. I don't know. I was kicked off of YouTube 3 years ago and never went back, but lately people have been getting, more and more strikes over there, demonetized again, kicked off of Facebook again. And I believe the back end of Facebook and Instagram switched everyone's accounts to not to have political stuff in their feeds. So, we're dealing with it. It's a battle to get the information out, because I just think peace, freedom, liberty, and privacy are the four things that all of us can agree on. And that is what we're losing in real time. And there's no sides. That is what is happening in America.
Yeah, and big tech has a lot of influence, not just on what we're seeing and hearing, but what we're thinking in regards to manipulating our ideas and perspectives and all the psychological warfare that they're constantly doing. And the work of Dr. Robert Epstein
Yeah.
is phenomenal. I'm sure you probably have talked to him. He's
hmm
done just amazing work. I remember when he was on Rogan's podcast, and I told him this when he was on my show. I'm like, it's probably one of the most overlooked episodes ever, because I'm like, he's
Yeah.
literally telling people that they're not just controlling the information, but they know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly how to what information to show you and not show you to motivate you or
Yeah.
affect the way you think and the way you perceive things. And nothing is more dangerous than that, because if you control the information, then you control the people, because we're only as good as the information we have access to. And the fact that more people aren't concerned about that, and I am concerned about that, and with, like you said, with the election right around the corner, and even when there is an election year, there
Right.
just anytime there's headlines, new information, if there's some geopolitical stuff going on, if there's any type of news event, you have to assume there's a reason why there's certain information being suppressed and other information not. I mean, January 6th, for the longest time, people thought it happened the way the mainstream media told you it happened, until finally you see some people in the agencies saying, well, we can't tell you how many people from the government were there pretending to be Trump supporters. We can't tell you how many people were there, who worked for the FBI. We can't tell, it's like everything is a freaking psyop, and people
Right.
don't realize that literally everything is a psyop. Every protest, every I mean, Chaos, great book by Tom O'Neill, right? And he that book about just like the hippie
Yeah.
movement and how that was controlled and manipulated. Like you have to assume that everything is a psyop until like the government's guilty until proven otherwise, not
Right.
innocent until proven guilty. And that's kind of, I mean, it sucks to live that way, to live in this conspiratorial world where you believe like, hey, everything could be a weapon or used as a weapon to manipulate me or to convince me that this happened when that really happened. I mean, just recently I had I didn't have him on, but Tommy Robinson, the quite famous English
Oh,
actor.
yeah, I know him. I had him on once.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, he was on
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson's show. Weirdly
hmm
enough, it was he just had him on, and his interview was on YouTube. Weirdly enough, that's not so I'm waiting to see how long that's going to last, or if there's some other reason. And then again, this is like the conspiratorial brain, like why are they letting me have access to him all of a sudden, And
Yeah.
but he did some obviously I don't agree with everything he says or does or whatnot, but he's exposed some stories in the UK very similar to
Yeah.
some stuff that happens here, with like, hey, this is what actually happened, and then they spin the story saying that it was this racist person that hated these people or whatever, and then the media, and they ruin people's lives because of it, and then he gets in trouble or locked up for exposing the story, and even somebody like him, like, you shouldn't censor him, because the way you fight bad or good ideas is or bad ideas is with good ideas,
Right.
and the price you pay for freedom of speech is sometimes you're giving a voice to people you disagree with, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's I think that too often people use they justify the intervention of some type of censorship. Like, it's like, well, he's
Yeah.
over the top, or he's racist, like a Tommy Robinson or whatnot. He's this, he's that. And it's like, well, okay, well, let me listen to him and then come to my own conclusions. Let me, if he's that racist and whatnot, like, let me listen to him and then come to my own conclusion on how racist he is, or if you're painting a picture that doesn't exist, Andrew.
Right.
Same thing. I remember for the longest time, people were like, "You got to have Andrew Tate on." I'm like, "Who the hell is Andrew Tate?" This was before he became a
Yeah.
household name, and I'd have listeners hit me up like, "Oh, you got to check out Andrew Tate." And I wasn't. I'm like, he's a kickboxer. I'm like, not really that interested in talking to him. He doesn't seem that interesting to me. And then once he got censored, I immediately said, "Okay, now I'm interested." Right. So it's like,
Yeah,
for,
backfired.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, it becomes a forbidden fruit. Or if somebody's getting censored, you want to know, like, well, what could he possibly be censored for? It's like
Right.
Alexander Dugin from, speaking of Russia. I had
Right.
Michael Millerman on my show, and Michael Millerman
Oh,
was
wow.
the first professor to translate Alexander Dugin's uh, 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 books into English. And
Oh,
he
wow.
got in trouble and whatnot. Super fascinating guy. Michael Millerman's one of the most fascinating people I've ever talked to on the show, and I
Cool.
don't say that lightly. But he because Alexander Dugin was considered the most dangerous philosopher and the most censored philosopher, I went deep into his work, and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't agree with everything he says, but I find him incredibly fascinating. And I think that he has a lot of great points in regards to this spiritual battle and this the trends into transhumanism and all this stuff. Like, he makes really valid points about all these
Yeah.
things. And so it's like, to me, nobody should be censored. And the fact that people still accept censorship, like it's okay in some cases, is insanity. I mean, Twitter had child porn on, they
Still does.
still
Still does. And now is even like tripling down on, anything can go. It's weird because they decided that anything can go the same week that they signed on to the World Economic Forum, UN, censorship pact. So it's very strange. I don't know what's going on there, but it's clearly there's an algorithm running it. I saw yesterday a whole bunch of people got suspended, and then they all complained and they were all put back on. But something's going on in the back end at Twitter. And I told people when I wasn't reinstated, but I told people when they got reinstated, I said, I want to see the evidence that the FBI and DOJ and CIA still aren't in the background there, because even though he bought it, we've never we saw the Twitter files. Was that taken care of? Because it appears that a lot of the money that's involved still has the open door for the NSA and DHS and all of them. So, I just it's freedom of speech right now. Twitter's the best place for it, but to think that it's not being monitored or or data isn't being scooped up and then used is kind of naive. And also, what you're saying is important to think about, which is we have a country without transparency. And JFK in the 1961 address, he said, secrecy is repugnant, in this country, and yet we've allowed this BS reasons of national security. If you do FOIA things, or you get anything from the FBI vault or CIA reading room, there's so much that's blacked out. And what I've learned over time from talking to enough people is that when things are blacked out for reasons of national security, often it's our government that committed crimes, or at least is complicit in crimes here and overseas. They don't want the institutions to be embarrassed or looked at. But it's not like we're the people that are paying for this. Nothing should be that. And I think something you brought up also is really important. We've seen no one go to jail or be held accountable, because I'm somebody who really looked into the 2008 crash, and frankly, not only do I think it was by design and purposeful and hurt hundreds of millions of people, but nobody went to jail. And it's very clear that they're fining some banks $11 billion, but nobody's going to jail. And they put in that whole collateral consequences memo, basically to say, if the institution's too big or important to America, we're not going to prosecute. And now we're at a place where, the Epstein case is back out. I still believe that the top rung, the parent company running America, is connected to the Epstein case. And, we have another situation again. We have a woman in jail for 20 years and no clients. And yet you see that Chase had to pay $300 million. Other people, UBS, I think, also Deutsche Bank. I mean, it's not okay that there's never anyone held accountable. I mean, they're having big galas clapping for Bill Clinton. I hear that he's never, ever, ever been questioned about his relationship with Epstein, ever, to this day. So, I mean, what we're looking at too is a society that has become complacent because we don't believe there's going to be actual justice. And then when you see this lawfare crew that came out of the Obama's DOJ, this would be Weissman, Eisen, McCord, Wittes. They're all at Brookings. And other places now, Just Security, that have perpetrated the lawfare against Donald Trump. They put Bannon in jail. Bannon and Navarro are both in jail right now for not showing up to a fraudulent committee that never should have been. And you see all the persecution of people. You brought up also January 6th. A lot of people don't realize, the FBI currently is only giving about 30%, is only getting about 30% of the data from law enforcement around the country. So any statistics we're seeing about crime are totally bogus. But scarier than that, I've had on a couple of the whistleblowers that spoke out from the FBI on 9/11. I mean, on January 6th, they said that they charged every single case as an individual case of domestic terror. So every case of 1,900 cases is an individual case of domestic terror. So suddenly domestic terror is the number one crime in America, or, they're going after the Trump people. And we've also seen this in documents that have come out from that group that Clapper and Brennan and a lot of the guys that lied with the 51 intelligence officials about the 2019 disclosure of Hunter Biden's laptop and forward. A lot of those people never been held accountable. We've never seen anyone. I mean, Crossfire Hurricane, John Brennan worked with the Five Eyes Nations to have people involved in Trump's campaign, but also other people running, Ted Cruz, Ben Carson, to have foreigners bump into them in specific places called bumping them, to write up reports to then launch an investigation into Russian collusion they knew didn't happen. And they put our country through this for a year. And then they have the Weissman really investigation into a fraud, Crossfire Hurricane, that they all knew didn't happen. And then put Julian Assange in jail the second the Mueller report comes out, so he can't tell anyone that there was no hack by Russia. And then the whole Ukraine impeachment was about Donald Trump calling and asking about Burisma and the relationship between Joe Biden and his family and the embassy in Ukraine and there, because he was president now and needed to know what was going on. They impeach him for that. Then they impeach him for January 6th when he was at the lips speaking when any breach happened. And then, the 4 cases against Trump. They're all coming from a very specific group of lawfare people, I believe, also paid for by the parent company or the global public-private partnership running our country. So right now, I think that the 3 branches are right here, and we are at the bottom, and we got an intelligence branch that shouldn't exist, and we got a lawfare persecution branch that'll go after anyone they have to protect the institutions that are working for a public-private partnership above our government. And when I say our country's captured, that's what I mean. But again, we have to realize reasons of national security, because our government committed a crime, should not be kept from the people. And a lot of this stuff, and like we talked about, all these rules and regulations, luckily, I think the Chevron case and the SEC case last week will start to chip away from that. But a lot of people's lives are ruined by agencies that shouldn't even exist, by judges that work for the agencies that aren't even judges, and by punitive damages that go back into some fund. And frankly, I learned that our money that we're sending to Ukraine is going to the World Bank and then being distributed. So, I mean, just so many levels of deception and deceit. That's why I say, if you're still playing the left and right, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever, you don't understand that we're all equally under threat in America of losing our freedom and our country, because it has been usurped. And frankly, they started on the local level. So now people wake up to the DAs and to the school boards and all of that. But, if you go read some of Soros's writings from the 80s and 90s, that was always something that they were doing, was getting to the local communities, especially schools. So now we're at a place where we need to demand transparency. I mean, the craziest thing to me to this day is that not one person on Wall Street, even the names we know, the Dubin and Stately from Chase, and even Clinton, nobody's been held accountable for the Jeffrey Epstein case. You and I both know that it was an intelligence and blackmail operation. We've seen none of that blackmail. We don't know who's on it. And if we think that intelligence branch that is that is handling all of the information, if it still exists, are ever going to show it to us under their current form. That's never going to happen. But honestly, for transparency purposes, I think the American people should be demanding a lot of this stuff be uncovered. I'm glad they're talking about 9/11 again, especially Building 7. I had on a guy, one of the engineers, and it's just like there's logical questions that need to be answered, and we deserve to have the answers. And because we've decided that, they'll give us the answers, or they'll have some stupid committee hearing where nobody's under oath and they can just lie to us like Brennan and Clapper or Fauci last week and moving on. That's not accountability. And as long as we're acting like the agencies are people and everyone's guilty, at said agency, then nothing's ever going to change. We need to name names and hold people accountable that hijacked this country and allowed it to get here.
Yeah, and I mean, look at Seth Rich with WikiLeaks. That's something that scares me too. Is like, so I believe some of his family members said it wasn't a murder, but they so quickly can cover up something. I mean, you look at JFK, the files, they're still redacted
I know.
papers, and they're still restricting a true investigation into that and any intel that they might have on who was linked to it, and that was a long time ago. And same
Yeah.
thing with the 9/11 thing. Now that the petrodollar is no more, they're openly talking about things that they knew already. The 28 pages that were redacted that showed links to Saudi and all that stuff. So it's like it's crazy because it seems like you can't win, because what they'll do is if you do come out and you do speak out, you're like Julian Assange, you
Yeah.
end up locked up for life. Edward Snowden ended up having to, be away from his family and live in a foreign nation under secrecy just to stay alive and be able to speak your truth. And and they'll demonize people. I mean, you look at what happened to Russell Brand. All of a sudden, these allegations pop out, right? It's like they use that playbook over and
Yeah.
over again. You hear stories of people who magically have child porn on their computers
I
because
know.
they're outspoken, and that stuff does happen. Why wouldn't you? If you were the government, why would you not do that to discredit somebody? Because who's going to push back against that? Who's going to say, like, I'm not going to defend this guy. This guy's into child porn, right? Even though if you're really trying to put a lid on child porn, like we talked about, where's all the money being invested in the child porn on Instagram and Twitter and all the weird breastfeeding on Facebook? Remember that when that whole thing
Oh,
was
it's so
trending? I'm like,
creepy. I
what?
mean, it's so degenerate. Like, but this is we talked about the Bezmenov interview before. I know you've interviewed people and involved in that. And I'll tell you, the demoralization, dehumanization, the, full on deprivation and the level they've gone to basically destroy the culture, destroy society, destroy any because of diversity, destroy what really is our strength in America, as most people believe in freedom and liberty and do unto others. And I mean, I think the great majority of Americans really just want the government to do their job and leave us alone. And that should be an administrative job. We've allowed these people to elevate themselves and we treat them like they're kings and queens and somehow above us, when somebody like you and me would never even want to do that. I mean, now a lot of people have to get, their things together and have to force themselves to go out there and run because they've made it's so costly to even run and serve your community. But they've made it like you're walking into the lion's den because you might not agree with someone. That's kind of why I wrote the book. I use the analogy of recovery, 12-step recovery program, and that our country is addicted to conflict and chaos. And I outline who I think the dealers are, who I think the suppliers are, kind of where the culture, was shattered multiple times, and kind of that it's up to us from the inside out. Like, we don't the fact that, like, I get emails all the time from people like they haven't talked to their kids since the vaccine because they disagreed on that, or their neighbors hate them because they know they voted for Trump, or people can't say what they really think at work because they're too scared they'll get in trouble for something they don't even know is wrong. So there's just so much going on that's keeping people hypersensitive, hyper anxious, in a state of being easily manipulated. And it's not stopping. And frankly, I think the media is the most complicit here. And honestly, I think that MSNBC is an intelligence operation. I don't think that is a news channel at all. And I think that
No, not.
CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, these are not news organizations, and they don't deserve a lot of these writers, especially the ones that have odd conflicts of interest on the back end, they don't deserve our respect, but they are also still being used as primary sources, trusted media, all of that, when they've deceived their viewers so much. I mean, I look at even The View. I think these people are abusive to their own audience. I think they hate and loathe their own audience more than anyone else, more than us, more than the free speakers or even the right or the libertarian minds. I think they look at their audience as if they beat them down every day. That the vitriol and hatred that comes from, Whoopi Goldberg and what's her name, all through all of them. But, that's not at Donald Trump. That's at half the country. When Joe Biden's standing on stage saying MAGA Republicans, I don't even know what that means. But when he's saying that, and basically that's no different than Hillary's deplorables. I mean, they want us so to hate each other. I mean, Joy Reid and Nicole Wallace on MSNBC, and God, Andrew Weissman, the architect of the lawfare and the fake Mueller report. These people go on TV every single night and encourage people to absolutely hate their neighbor, to despise, half this country, to lump everyone into this. And it's been so destructive. And that's another thing. Like I talk in my book a lot about, my experience in recovery and just kind of walking into a room of strangers as like a young 20 something in LA and being like, wait a minute. So there's a room in this town where everyone knows that they're the problem and they actually want help and they want to go inside and better their lives. And I feel like right now, everyone basically in America that is involved, and at least in the psychological warfare and operations on social media, should realize how much damage they're doing to themselves by allowing this. Because you brought up earlier, and I know we talked about this, but we definitely talked about it on Union of the Unwanted, which I hope everyone watches because it's my favorite show. But we've talked about the NATO Battle for the Brain documents. I mean, if you, and that's also for anyone that's watching on the melkshow.com website under resources, I have that document in a PDF because everything's disappearing because Google's scraping the back of the internet, it appears. But that document is terrifying. And frankly, that is the NATO hub that is run by the French, I believe, in near Langley. It's in America, it's NATO, but that is their psychological operation hub. And in there, it talks about that the weapons of the future are the individual human brains. And if people don't realize, like, especially when they're triggered online or, or emotionally triggered, or a story, like you said, rises to the top out of nowhere, it's like, what are they not telling us? If that's trending, something important's happening that matters a lot more. That's how I feel about everything now, which is a scary place to be. One of my most inspirational people that really guided my view of what I think it is, Hannah Arendt. And she, in her book, Origins of Totalitarianism, she said that the best time for totalitarianism to take over is when the public believes everything and nothing at the same time, when they think everything's possible and nothing is true. And frankly, that's where we are. So the information battle is the most important, but also people have to realize psychologically and emotionally and spiritually, they have to go inside and protect themselves, because the people that I believe are running this, global, crackdown, the less of us, the better. And the more of us that are docile and either drug addicts or just don't care or sitting in the basement playing video games, the better. And this is, we really have to force ourselves to go back to interacting with our community and our neighbors and our taking our local community and where we have influence and being proud of it. And if we're not proud of it, being like a positive change maker. And there's many other people that will join you. We're just at a point where people are very scared, I think, to even talk to each other. And that's why I say leave the R&D and L or whatever outside. And like, there's so many good things we can do that we do agree on. Maybe that's the path to take. And to each his own. In some other areas we might never agree on, but there's so many more that we do in terms of safety and security and privacy. And look, we sent $200 billion to Ukraine. Like you said, a lot of that's laundered back into the military industrial complex, then into campaigns, which is a big part of what's going on there. And, if every state had a good government and $1 billion, I mean, they don't want to end homelessness as a cash cow for them, but that would be no problem. But how about the millions and millions of like acres of farmland that is just totally not being used? Or like I said, we've been in many places where literally there's houses, main streets, empty supermarkets, empty movie theaters, empty stores for miles. I mean, in Illinois, in Ohio, in Michigan, in Utah. I mean, you could literally like take a group of people and go rejuvenate a city or a town in America for a couple $100,000 to start. And yet we're not doing that with our farms. We're not doing that with our industry. We're not building anything really that's being competitive. And yet we're all sitting here waiting for somebody to come along, and that's just not going to happen. I mean, we really we're not going to vote ourselves out of this. We created this mess by taking our eyes off the ball, not taking the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and accountability and justice seriously. And I think we have a shot. I do see what's happening as an opportunity for everyone out there, because things are so chaotic, and I think the financial system is going to get totally whacked soon as well. I think it's a good time for people to go inside and decide what they want the future to look like, not just for this country, but for themselves, because right now there's a lot of job openings, as I say, for leaders and for community organizers on the positive front, and for positive change makers and heroes. I mean, and so many people like us, we grew up, we went to college, we did this, we had kids, we moved on. And it's like now you're in your 40s, your 50s, and you see the world falling apart. And a lot of people are watching it when it's like we're the ones that should be doing something to fix it on a grand scale. And I just feel like people are waiting on the sidelines for something. And if we wait too long, we might all really regret it.
Well, obviously, I think a big way of doing that to keeping us from actually doing anything is helping with keeping us depressed,
Yeah.
struggling, unhappy, fighting among ourselves. I mean, this is and dependent on them, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
recently the something that I've done some research on before, but has been, talked about a little bit more of late is like I think it's called like the Invention Secret Act, and where the government can control patents and control information and technology and suppress it, because there's industries that those lobbyists and those
Yeah.
corporations and those politicians want to control. And if some new technology comes around that completely puts those industries out of business, that can hurt them. So it's like it's
Yeah.
always been about control. It's about controlling industries. You go back to like the light bulb conspiracy, right? They had light bulbs that were lasting too long, and then they all colluded to say like, hey, we need light bulbs that only last this
Right.
long, so then we can control the industry, or we'll all go out of business. And that's the thing, even with oil, right? Like now that electric, you always have to think about things in a conspiratorial manner, where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, why are they okay with electric cars and these type of things when before it was suppressed? I mean, there was that great documentary Pump. I had somebody from that documentary on about
No.
all these alternative energies, and then there's also Who Killed Electric Car and all this thing. But all of a sudden they're okay with it, and it's never organic. It's like if they're okay with it, it's because there's some new industry that they're controlling and some new game plan. Same thing with all the, going green nonsense. It's like we were sold this idea of like electric car is supposed to be environmentally friendly, and everybody still has that image that if you drive a Prius, it's because you care about the environment. But yet
Right.
nobody's explained to me, how do you get those minerals for the battery? How do you dispose of that battery in a, environmentally friendly manner? But yet
Right.
they've done a great job of at least painting that picture, where now we've been brainwashed and believing that these things are environmentally friendly, and morally I feel like I'm doing something good.
Exactly. Well, that's what a lot of it is about, especially when it comes to the Hollywood people. I mean, I don't know how they explain that George Clooney and Julia Roberts, and of course the campaign is being run by Jeffrey Katzenberg, which most people don't know. And they have this big gala in Hollywood for Joe Biden last week. Nobody noticed that he was off track. They had the big thing at Radio City with all the guys from with like Jason Bateman and all those guys, and Obama, Clinton and Biden. Nobody noticed there either. I mean, what's happening is the level of deceit and lies is being revealed. This is the best thing that could have happened, I think, to everyone, is what happened in that debate last week. And the reason I think that is what we are doing to this man, whether you love him or hate him, is incredibly cruel. You know, like I would never in a million, me and my sisters were like, oh my, if that was our dad, first of all, he would never have been allowed to run. But okay. But if that was my dad and my mother or operatives or the people surrounding him were humiliating him on a regular basis in public to the world, I mean, you would put a stop to it, but they're tripling down. You know, they're even saying that Hunter and Jill are now like his main advisors. I didn't know they had security clearance, but whatever. But you know, we have to really look at how much we should loathe the press that lied to us about all this stuff all the way back. And again, they're the ones that get promoted. They're the ones that get their shows on YouTube that never get taken down. They're the ones that, you know, trusted news source and all this. And truly, it's been a psychological operation on many fronts. And I think what I mean, as terrible as it was to watch what Joe Biden melt down on TV, I thought that it was an incredibly cruel thing to do in general. And I despise the man. I've always despised him way before he ran for president. He was one of the people I just every time he spoke, I felt like you know, nails on the chalkboard. But it really says terrible things about us as a country, and that's where I also really hope that the people of the United States know, especially because I believe. Again, I believe that BlackRock and Vanguard play a big part in the controlled demolition of America for their future goals and financial obligations. I believe that they think the 1.6 billion people in India and the 1.8 billion people in China deserve a lot more attention, and that has a lot to do with the model that I think is going on now. But we have to also realize that we do still have power in America, and I don't know how many other places that is actually true, but we do here, and at least for a little while. So for me, I just wish that people would look at what the other side is saying. And this is where I mean, like Joe Biden and whoever's clear. I mean, they clearly showed the whole world Joe Biden's not running anything. Okay, and then after that, the storyline was, well, who cares if he's not running anything? He's better than Trump. Oh, really? Well, then who is running everything? Now we need some answers. Well, it's the president again. I mean, like obviously none of that's true, but we should all realize that we've been equally deceived by a media and a political class that is fighting for survival. And I have not seen one person ask about that 2023 global goals document that is right there on the White House website that blatantly shows about $3 trillion and lines out all the 17 sustainable development goals, which is actually to full track and trace totalitarian technocracy, and all of the money that Biden's going to give to them in the second term to achieve Agenda 2030. To me, that it should be the one thing that everyone in America is like, no, we're not signing on to that. But nobody's asking about it. And nobody's saying, like Klaus Schwab said on stage in 2016 to Joe Biden's face that he was his best partner in the fourth industrial revolution. We had 30 executive orders dropped that line up with the 17 sustainable development goals day one. So again, there's people that are invested, I believe, around and for me, I think both Bushes, Obama, Clinton, and Biden are all part of this globalist governance plan. And frankly, it's been a long game. They empowered China. But right now, if you listen to any of these people, as closely, unfortunately, as I do, they're all saying they prefer China's model of running China to the rest of the world, and they'd like to expand that because, frankly, the people behind the scenes a lot of people don't know this, but the number two to Anthony Blinken running Chinese foreign policy is this Mike Donilon, and he was the head of International Investment Institute at BlackRock. And he's running all of our Chinese policy, basically, right there. And then you had Biden come out and say he's putting tariffs on electric vehicles coming from China, when he knows full well that China and BlackRock are building those electric vehicle plants in Mexico, where they decided there will be no tariffs. So it really does appear that we're being liquidated by a parent company that now sees America as something to destroy, consolidate, And then they'll come take our natural resources. Them buying our farmland has nothing to do with them farming. It has to do with them farming for their country. So China will farm, send everything home, and everything else will be protected land under the 30 by 30. But all of this is very real. And it's just, I don't think the stakes are very clear right now. And every time that they put out something about Donald Trump being authoritarian, this Brookings Institute, which really needs to go, has a whole like authoritarian watch, and Donald Trump's going to be a dictator. And if you look at his first term before they unleashed the COVID and the direct going direct campaign, frankly, he wasn't any of that. In fact, he told Hillary Clinton he wasn't going to go after her. So now this time, I really hope that it's not about. They keep talking about Trump getting revenge or this or that. Do you know that we've spent $200 million in taxpayer money for them to try to go after Trump since 2016? $200 million. And if they had anything in all this time, they wouldn't have concocted insane lawfare cases. But $200 million of our money have gone into them trying to destroy one man. Does that make any sense? It's not because of Donald Trump. It's really because Donald Trump got in the way, in my opinion, of Agenda 2030. He pulled out of the World Health Organization, a huge cash cow for them. He pulled out of UNESCO, which is the poison beneath our education system. He pulled out of the Migration Pact. He pulled out of the fake Paris Climate Accords, which was another trillions of dollars. He pulled out of also another group, NAFTA. So, as much like him or hate him, a lot of what they're saying about him is already not true. He was already in office and he did not act like a rabid dictator. But frankly, I think that we should have some accountability for the $200 million spent by the lawfare and intelligence community to try to destroy him. And I don't think that it's about left or right, Republican and Democrat. I think he got in the way of the global governance model of Agenda 2030 by dismantling the pieces. And, Biden comes right back in and fully refunds UNESCO, refunds the World Health Organization, refunds, all of this, does these pacts and stuff. And the truth is, it's very clear to see America is being sold out to the highest bidder, and the highest bidders don't care at all about the people of the United States. And like you said, I think we're the last stand for freedom. So if we don't start caring about it and going inside and actually taking personal responsibility and, figuring out how to make our lives more simple, like you said, depending on the government. I mean, the government hired 70,000 new employees just in June. To the government. I mean, this is how ridiculous it is. 2.1 million people work for the federal government in dozens, hundreds of agencies that shouldn't exist. And imagine if we got rid of 75% of them, sent them back into the private sector to start to rebuild internally our country, we'd be on a much better track. And that's what they're trying to scare people with is, oh, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. What he's going to do if he does win is go in like he was supposed to and be a CEO that cleans out DC. And that's what I hope to do. And mainly, I really do hope that there's audits on the Pentagon and National Endowment for Democracy and USAID and all these groups that have really gone a long way to hurt our reputation in the rest of the world. Because while they're isolating us, the rest of the world are creating alliances. And I know you read a lot of foreign stuff, and so do I, but I'm telling you, the foreign papers, for the first time I've ever seen it in the last 3 months, are actually blaming us, the people of the United States. A lot of op-eds and other I read this Indian newspaper, I read another newspaper from Croatia and some other places, just because the guys these are journalists I found around the world that have been really spot on many things, even in Asia. And a lot of them are saying that the people of the United States are the problem, that we're not, that we're allowing our country to be destroyed from within, and they don't understand it. And at some point it crosses the line of, well, they deserve what they get, like the propaganda that took us into Iraq. So for me, I'm very worried about the people of the United States not waking up in time to realize that we're not going to have any allies if we keep following this maniacal warpath and this, the funny business with the financial system. So I'm just hoping enough people stand up, because like they're saying, the 2024 election is going to be about ballots, not about votes. Because if they print a ballot for every illegal, everyone that gets a driver's license, everyone, even dead people, which it looks like they're doing, our votes don't count at all. It's not left and right. No one's votes count if there's so many fraudulent ballots being submitted by God knows who. So, we have 4 months, but All I know is we have 4 months to either make it or break it when it comes to the future of this country being a constitutional republic.
Well, the concern is that we both know that a election's not going to be what makes or breaks this country. It's going to be the people
Yeah.
standing up and being proactive and speaking out and demanding justice. You know, you look at Epstein. You brought up Epstein. His brother was on the PBD podcast just yesterday or the day
Right.
before, and his brother's kind of doing his rounds. And it's just one of those things. He has a lot of friends in high places. He has a lot of resources, and he can't get any justice for his suicide. He's just basically trying to publicly be, for it to publicly be known that it wasn't a suicide. It was
Right.
a murder, and he wanted to clear his brother's name in that regard and really expose what really happened. And he can't. And it just, that's kind of the type of things that make you feel helpless. It's like, okay, everybody's corrupt, the whole system's broken, and even if there are people who have resources and ability to kind of do what's right, they it becomes impossible. It seems impossible. Whistleblowers get scared to speak
Right.
out because of what happens to whistleblowers before them. All the political, we talk about political murders and assassinations in other countries. I mean, obviously that happens here. We brought
Right.
up Seth Rich. I mean, you look at just historically, Gary Webb. You look at Danny Castellero, who I
Mhm.
had one of the filmmakers who did that American Conspiracy
Yeah.
docu-series that was on Netflix, and I was really happy to see a series that highlighted the Danny Castellero story and the Inslaw case and the Promise software and how the U.S. government was even spying on their allies. They were
Yeah.
using this spy software, selling it to their allies for them to use it, and then put a backdoor so they could spy on their allies that were buying this software from them. And so it's like there are no friends anywhere, and they'll spy even on their own allies, right? And they're
Yeah.
very cutthroat. But people should be concerned because really, what's more concerning is zooming out and looking at the big picture of like the transhumanism, the people, the generations of young kids who are accepting this fake food as food, this fake way of living, just via internet and via online as a actual way of life. And then that becoming normalized, where eventually we'll be so detached from anything that's real, organic,
Right.
and fulfilling, and then we'll just be locked into some machine that the higher ups control and can manipulate. And wow, I should have ended this on a much more positive.
No, but the truth is that it's up to us, and it is positive because I see you go out, you take your kids to soccer, you make sure that your kids are socializing, that they're not behind the computer. It just requires a lot more. It requires a reorganizing of your priorities right now. I think for most people, and figuring out how you can live. I mean, we're doing a lot of things just in our own life where we're not spending on stuff we don't need. We don't need. We feel like we don't need anything as long as we can feed ourselves and pay for our life. But I mean, really, cutting the consumerism, the materialism, a lot of that's reality TV. I think a lot of this has been by design to really, really distract people as our country has been slowly but surely torn apart, and our liberties discarded, and our freedoms usurped, and our privacy totally disregarded. And frankly, all of this stuff has proven, I think people are sick of it all. I think people are sick of, being, propagandized. They're sick of the gluttony, the greed, the vanity. It's like we've been living in this like world where the seven deadly sins have become like glamorous, and the 10 commandments is a problem, and the problem is really us, and allowing it. And we were very tolerant, but that's how Bezmenov said it would happen, slowly but surely. Our tolerance became, like you said, a lot of my friends, I still lived in LA when the Prius became popular. I felt like overnight everyone had them, and I was just like, and it was a virtue signaling thing because nobody wanted it at the time. But I remember, like, I felt like those are the same people that probably are still getting boosters right now. I don't know, but or they've woken up. But like you said before, I've had a couple people reach out to me that I never in a million years would think would get any of what we're saying at all, and they're pretty awake too. A lot of friends of mine that are real artisans, like crew members, gaffers, and lighting techs, and set designers, really have had it. They feel like everything is even in that realm, they're just sick of it. They don't want to do this anymore. They want to go back to art and music. They want to go back to people want to go back to the workplace where they aren't scared that HR is going to write them up for asking the wrong question. I mean, the amount of lawsuits that have happened since the BLM and DEI and everything in small businesses and corporations over, saying the wrong pronoun and all this stuff. It's got to go. We got to go back to being sturdy and tough and land of the free, home of the brave. I mean, there's just so much great about our country that has been undermined. And frankly, I really do believe that the majority of people see this. They believe that the Washington, D.C., the 10 by 10 vassal and its unholy alliance with both the military industrial complex and Wall Street is the problem in this country, and that it is not about parties. It's not about color. It's not about gender or whatever that is. It's about that we have these people that really believe that they are supra class, that they're above the rest of us, and they run this country covertly in a lot of ways. And again, it is up to us. And like you said, and for me, obviously, I want Donald Trump to win, but whatever happens in 2024, it has to be the beginning of the people redefining their relationship with the federal government and really looking at everything. I've heard many people talk about a new convention of states and a new where every state's represented and this and that, but we really have to figure out a better way forward, because I mean, I would like to see 75 to 80% of Washington, D.C. dismantled, and I think we'd be much better off. Like you said, before the Patriot Act, we had fine intelligence, we had military intelligence, we didn't need, and anyone should go on that DHS website. It's like a Frankenstein agency running the border, running spying, running domestic violence, domestic terrorism, whatever, with no oversight. I mean, zero. So again, we got to start demanding that, but we have to stop playing sides. We're all on the same side, and that is truly how I feel at this point. Either you're for global governance and a future being a global citizen, or you're for the sovereignty of this nation and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and our common bonds being the future.
Yeah, I'm one who tends to believe that voting doesn't matter, and if it did matter, they wouldn't let you do it. And
Well, they don't really, do they?
yeah, well, but yeah, good point. Especially with electoral votes, and obviously the manipulation of ballots and voting, which has always happened. This idea that
Oh yeah.
all of a sudden, elections are fair and balanced, and there's no meddling. I'm like, there's always been meddling. The only difference is like how much of it, who's doing the most of it, and how much, and if it did sway the result of the election. That's an argument that you can have, but I mean,
Right.
the argument that there wasn't any meddling is just silly. But this is one of the few times that I look at the election that I say, like, if this theory of like picking the least of two evils is still evil. I don't know. I just don't have that feeling for this election. I kind of feel like, if whoever wins is going to bring us to the same place, there's no doubt or denying that if one side wins, we're going to get there way quicker. And, I tend to believe that you can't deny, regardless of how people feel about Trump, you can't deny the fact that he was a outsider. But I know people will argue with me till the end of time that, like, okay, he wasn't an outsider. I'm like, okay, was he elite? Yes, he wasn't, but he wasn't a political elite. He wasn't in that world. He was in maybe the construction elite, the real estate elite, but he wasn't in the political realm. He doesn't have years and years like Joe Biden in the political world where you make friends. You have people you do favors for, people who you owe favors for, all these type of connections and whatnot. And if anything, the more they try to lock him up, the more they try to prevent him from running, the more, I mean, people forget that Donald Trump was the only person who has ever became president or even ran for president that openly talked about vaccines causing autism, openly talked about 9/11 possibly being, more than meets the eye, openly talked about, the JFK assassination, and wanting to release these files. Like, he did a lot of things, a lot of firsts that other people didn't do. And, he openly pushed back against Fauci and said he wanted to open up the country quicker and
Hmm.
whatnot. And I know everybody talks about Operation Warp Speed. I agree. Like, there, I try to see things down the middle. Yes, he brags about Operation Warp Speed, but I have no doubt in my mind that if he was president, especially when he ran and with another doctor on stage during the debate, Dr. Ben Carson, and
Yeah.
not being ashamed or afraid to say, like, hey, even with this doctor who actually is a doctor right next to me, I will push back against the mainstream narrative that there's no link between vaccines and autistic symptoms and some of these autoimmune issues and all these other health issues that could be correlated with the increase of the vaccine schedule. And he wasn't afraid to say it. He openly talked about it, and he
Yeah.
he did push back. So I don't have any doubt that there could be a possibility that if he was still a president, that all those forced vaccinations for people just to go to work and put food on
Right.
the
Oh,
table.
yeah.
The fact that you forced nurses who were exposed to many sick people and you already had natural immunity, like, you forced these vaccines on people, that I have no doubt that that wouldn't have happened if he was a president. And people can argue that, if they want, but I just see much more evidence to believe that he wouldn't have done it than I see evidence that he would have done it. He doesn't have that. He didn't have any. There was no reason to believe that he would go that far, especially when he was getting criticized at the time for
For
even,
wanting to reopen.
yeah, for
Right.
wanting to reopen and pushing
Right.
and talking about alternative treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and whatnot. So, there was many indications that he pushed back against, those people who gave us probably one of the worst events in human history. And I say that because it's the only event in human history that, unless you believe in the Great Flood, but the only event in human history that affected all of us at the same time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
World War I, World War II, all these great wars. I mean, there was countries that were neutral, there's countries that stayed out of it. This affected everybody. I could fly to anywhere on the map and I could talk to somebody about their COVID experience. Not one
Yes.
person doesn't have a COVID experience. So it's hard to argue that it's not the greatest event in human history. Never mind, it fast tracked so many things from, like, censorship, like you talked about, to pushing just spying on their own citizens. It
Yeah.
created a divide between people that I'm not sure has ever been mended. When you look at, like, people who had different political views prior to COVID, like, there's a lot of people that I could talk to and we could disagree on stuff, but we could have, like, somewhat a civil discussion. That's gone. I mean, there's so many people that it's like our divide became so obvious and so
Right.
that we can't even have a civil discussion anymore on disagreements because we look at each other like we're the enemies, right? I look at you like you're the enemy because you're the one who wanted to mask my kids and force a vaccine onto myself and my family, and you helped with the brainwashing and the pushing of this propaganda that this vaccine was going to be the cure all to save us from this virus that was only killing the sickest people and the oldest
Right.
people. And so it's like I'm not sure that that can ever be fixed. And but I in a positive light, like we talked about, there's a lot of people in our lives that would never entertain the idea that Bill Gates was a eugenicist who
Right.
was not trying to save the world, but trying to push this depopulation agenda and trying to push this fake food so he can control the food sources and buying up these farms. So there's a lot of conversations that were only entertained in kind of a conspiratorial manner that now
Right.
are now looked at in a much more serious manner, where people are like, no, this is serious. Like, depopulation is a real thing. Eugenesis still exists. And like I've said on the show before, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing us he didn't exist. Well, the elite played the exact same trick.
Exactly.
Long time they convinced us that, oh, kings and queens, the royal family, that's just in the UK. We're past that. We don't have elite that control people or think that they're better than everybody else, who think that their bloodline is more important than your bloodline, that their decision making and what's best for the world it should be considered, and you're just a peasant. Like, those people don't exist. That was, in the past. And it's like, that's the trick they played. There's always been people, and there's always been people who want to control people. Like, since the beginning of time. There's always been rulers at trying to control others. And no, my internet, you still there? I think you froze for a second. You still
Oh,
there?
you froze too. So you froze on my end and I froze on the other. Okay, go ahead.
It's just those elite that we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, I just think that for a long time, people look at these historical events and they just see it as something that was, not something that is. And I think you can't deny now that, like, no, there's still people who want to control others. There's still people
Yeah.
who want to manipulate the system and the information that you have, and corrupt everything that's good in life. And so if there's any positive light in all this, is the fact that if we have any hope into the future, it's the fact that more and more people are waking up at a much faster
Yeah.
rate. And maybe they did play their hand, and maybe the pendulum did swing, really crazy in one direction, where, a lot of these issues that we're talking about, like foreign policy and government spying, like, there were just issues that we talked about, but didn't have a huge impact on our everyday lives. And then it swang in such a direction that it did. Now we couldn't
Yeah.
go anywhere without being spied on and being tracked, or being masked, or vaccinated, or told that we have to, follow these arrows down a grocery store line. But now I think it's swinging the other direction, where
Me too.
people are getting
Yeah.
upset. People are
I
finally.
100% think that it is. And again, COVID was terrible in so many ways, but it was an awakening in so many ways too for people. And it's still every week I see more and more people coming too. I had on Naomi Wolf recently. I've had on Jimmy as well. And when you hear these people feel they were so deceived, but once the COVID thing came, then the next thing is, well, what else is there? And what else is there? And then you realize it is a small group of people that have been manipulating this country for decades, and they pass it on. They groom the next set at the Poison Ivy League or at Oxford or Cambridge or wherever they go, and they put them in fellowships and think tanks, and then they pull them up, and it's just to keep the lies going, to keep the cover-ups going, to make sure information doesn't get to the people. And frankly, to me, Donald Trump right now is just sand in the gears to the global governance model that I believe that these people want to achieve. A, and B, I'm pretty convinced that Putin, Modi, Saudi Arabia, all of these people would still sit down with Donald Trump and negotiate a better way forward, where the BRICS nations aren't completely separate from the NATO nations. We can actually find a peaceful solution. There's plenty of money, obviously, energy, ability to have, clean air, clean water, infrastructure, energy, independence, all kinds of things that we can do basically with not that much work. But look, I look forward to seeing who he picks for the VP. I don't know what's going to happen with Biden and them. He says he's staying in. But like you said, in either case, both choices are about you. What do you want for the future of this country? Because the ideologies are completely different. Whether you think Trump was involved, he did pull out of all of those globalist entities that are huge trillion-dollar money laundering operations, in my opinion, especially the Paris Climate Accords and the World Health Organization and all the tentacles that they have. I mean, we're talking about NATO, let alone NATO. They're all worried about NATO that should have ended a long time ago, and it's clearly not a defensive force. So just those things at this point would be fine with me. And I hope that Schedule F thing happens, because we need to clean out the government bowels. Again, we pay for all of those people as well, just like we do locally. And, it's really just acknowledging that the American people need to take back not just their country, but also their government and their money and everything else as intended, or, then it's our fault. And I don't want it to be our fault. So like I said, right now is we're living history. Whatever's written about this time, it will be a big inflection point in history. And that's why I thought it was a good time. And my book's going to come out the last Labor Day. And I called it Americans Anonymous because quite frankly, we're all on the same team. And if we could just, for a minute, take a breath and work together to save our country and make our country better, go back to the concept of building a more perfect union, we can have that. I mean, America's on the precipice. It could go either way. And people just have to go inside and decide who they are, and what they want for themselves. And also, what do you want to tell your grandchildren or anyone in the future you did? If this is the goal, and it says it's explicitly on the Biden-Harris website to achieve Agenda 2030 as the predominant goal of their next term, well, the American people need to be told that on a massive scale and explained what it is. That's why you're good friends with people like Whitney Webb and Charlie Robinson and Jason Burmis, all these people. This information needs to be the most important information out there right now. Is the globalist parent company that is literally running the world. Like, they own it, and we, the people of all of our nations, are just lucky they're letting us be here. And it's got to be turned on the upside down, and people held accountable. That's what I hope. I just hope for a little bit of accountability and a little less, a little more transparency, and then we can start to figure out how to reach a more perfect union.
Yeah, without a doubt. And people just have to be kind of open to the idea that everything is a psyop. I mean, so
Yeah,
open
exactly.
society. I mean, there's all these non-government organizations, nonprofit organizations that are influencing things, and those elite, a lot of times they're indirectly controlling stuff and influencing things, and it's not as obvious as like, hey, this person did this, that person. They find really creative ways to sway things and populations in one direction or another. I mean, you look at just historically all the coups that we've been involved in,
Yeah.
all the proxy wars we find. I mean, just think about how good our special ops are, our intel, our ability to, manipulate things. If we can, from the outside, get a coup, push a coup to happen in a country, get the population to believe that this thing is organic when it's not. I mean,
Right.
the understanding that they have of how to sway the populations, perception on issues and events and whatnot is really, scary when you think about it.
It is.
You talked
Yeah.
about the news and media. I mean, Operation Mockingbird, they've been infiltrating, news organizations forever and making sure that they control the information that we're seeing. And for some reason, people still look at CNN or MSNBC or whatever mainstream media it might be as like a more reliable source over maybe you and I who are on
I
Rumble
know it's so
or
it's so
whatever.
crazy too, because the one thing that I do know, because I lived in Manhattan and in Hollywood and other places, this group, this people, these elite people, and they say it at their conferences, they literally believe not only that they're superior class, but that their problem is us, that they have to solve those humans. It's not just with climate change, it's with everything, that the problem is those humans down there. And we're going to have big conferences and talk about how to fix them, how to fix this, how to fix that. And really they loathe the people that they do not believe are in their ilk. And so that's another thing, realizing that, Mika and Joe don't like you. And they would never ever sit down and have a drink with you anywhere under any circumstance, because you're not in their world. And that is what we're dealing with as well. It's less, elites and more about, this groomed class of people that they believe that their problem is humanity, to solve that human problem. I mean, and they're not your friends, and we just have to start treating it like that. I also see the implosion all around, because everyone that has come into interaction with Joe Biden has been, in one extent or another. I mean, Jack Black was on stage yelling and screaming how much he loves Joe Biden. Did he go meet him before? I bet he did. And everyone's saying, like, up close, his eyes look, when people have dementia or Alzheimer's, that something's wrong with them. And now everyone's saying, oh yeah, we knew. And it's like, or, I'd rather the country be run by God knows who than by Donald Trump, because blah, blah, blah. Well, then you don't really love the country if you'd rather that, if you'd rather not know. So I just think a lot's being revealed. I actually am very optimistic. I feel I've said this the whole time. I feel like by August, everyone is going to have had it, and we're all going to equally agree that the government, regardless of the election, is a complete disaster and start over. I'm all for the convention of states and local freedom cells like me and Derek Bros talk about, and really putting it back together. And all because there's technology, it doesn't mean it's better. A lot of the things we did, that the Amish still do but it works just as well as it used to. And again, with all the technology, you talked about the hidden patents and stuff. If all that technology was in the hands of good people that wanted good outcomes for humanity, great. And we have to start looking at that too. Like the people in power need to be, you know, there temporarily, and certainly I hope the whole two-party thing falls apart. I would prefer to have what they have in foreign countries because like George Washington warned in his farewell speech, if we had two parties that were opposite each other, eventually they would be fighting each other and never think about the people. And that's where we are too. So, I thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
It's been
thanks for
awesome.
being on. And you're
Thank you.
right. I mean, if something that you said, it's a great tip, regardless what the future holds. I- It's hey, you know what? Like, spend more time just doing the things that are free. Like being around
Yeah,
friends and family and enjoy each other, and don't be enslaved by the material world of just consuming. And James Corbett's a documentary, Century of Enslavement, about the history of the Fed, but also he focuses on just how money enslaves us and how
right.
you end up buying a car, and then you end up having being enslaved by those payments. You buy a house you can barely afford, and you get enslaved by those payments. It's another way that banks
Yeah,
enslave us, right? Like you owe them that money, you're paying some ridiculous interest and whatnot. And I think many of our most precious moments don't require a whole lot of money
I
and
agree.
and material things. And you talked about the Amish. The Amish are pretty happy,
I
and
know.
people kind of look down upon the way they live. I mean, my parents came from Portugal, came to America. They were farmers, and I was always surprised going back how they were raised in a house with no running water, and but they had farmland, they had food, they all made wine and liquors and enjoyed company. And I would go back and be like, wow, I can't believe they were raised in this
I
environment.
know.
But then I would stop to think, I'm like, but everybody's happy, like everybody
Yeah.
here is happy. So it's like I went to America to like or my parents brought me to America to pursue more financial gain. But are we better off really? Because it's like, or have we been enslaved by this pursuit of financial gain, and we've lost all the things that were making us happy before we had any,
Yeah.
new cars or a house or whatnot. So, uh,
Right.
I think
And
that,
now we have people that don't even allow us to survive with what we have. Like you said, I mean, it's a matter of the amount of money, but it's always a struggle. It's always a stress. And then on top of that, all the fake financial news and this and that. And then you watch these giant multinational corporations and multinational bankers, and they're getting fined $11 billion here. They're getting fined here, but they just keep going forward. And God forbid, somebody does something and the IRS or any other agency regulations your farm with like that Amos Miller with the farm raw milk, and like they want to destroy him or whatever. It's really just about, we really just have to. I believe the financial system's going to implode one way or another. And like I say to everyone, value what, like you said, what you can. There's so much we can do for free, and everything that we need is free. I mean, really need. So, that's where we are. But I do believe that I am optimistic because I feel like there's more people that think what you and I are thinking, which wasn't political at all. This wasn't a political conversation. It was just, this is what we're dealing with now. And the more people that just get to that point and then take the next step to get involved one way or another, or even just to be a voice, or even just to be a voice in their own sphere of influence, to wake people up and to empower people to empower themselves, then we're winning, because they've never been so close to their one world government, and frankly they've never been so far, and they've never been so far because they can't control the narrative because of people like you and me and all the union and the unwanted people and many other great people out there. And we just got to keep fighting the battle no matter what. I just feel like Charlie, I was talking to Charlie the other day, and we were like, we are, we don't want to live in their dystopian future. Like it's worth fighting for. fighting for what we do want, because what we don't want is what's being presented in their agenda. And I think we should just all keep our eyes on, what we have in common there.
Yeah, like libertarians say, the government's not there to give you rights; they're there to protect your rights, and
Yeah.
most of us just want to be left alone, and that's something that we can all kind of agree on. And regardless what your worldview is or whatever ideology you subscribe to, I think less government in most cases is better. And
Me too.
so, but yeah, keep up the amazing work. You're one of
Thank
the
you.
hardest working people in the alternative media community. I follow you on many different platforms, and it
Thank
always
you.
amazes me how many times I'm like, oh, another notification, a Mel K show, another one, another one. I'm like, did I just see? It's like you're just constantly doing great interviews, tons of
Thank you.
great work. So please, people, check out Mel K. I follow you on Rumble. I know you also have you're on many podcast apps,
Yeah.
and I believe are you on a couple other video platforms? Or are you on BitChute?
Yeah, I'm on Band.video. I've been sitting over there at BitChute for a long time. I'm on the MelKShow.tv, which we're going to be ramping up as the censorship ramps up. We also have a members at the MelKShowLive.com. And then we have Rumble, which is our main hub. And then I'm elsewhere. I'm just not on YouTube and not on Telegram, but everywhere else. And also, my book will be out, so people can find that at Amazon under Mel K, Americans Anonymous, Restoring Power to the People, one citizen at a time. And I'm also going to be featured on Wimkin. It's WIMKIN. It's a new platform that we're working with, and a couple other things, because we're going to just keep trying. And, it's like whack-a-mole with the censorship. So wherever we go down, we're going to find somewhere else to go up. And thank you so much. And I'm very grateful to you for your show, your amazing interviews, and you are the person also that organizes Union of the Unwanted, which is such a pleasure and such a great show. And I'm so proud to be a part of that when I am. And thank you so much. And I hope you'll come on my show. We've been trying to do that, and then we get busy with life, but we're going to make it happen.
Yeah,
So thank you so much.
it's good that we're busy with life, because I mean, getting too consumed with this stuff and kind of getting, you don't want to neglect the things that are really important in life. I mean, obviously we got to keep fighting for those rights to enjoy those things, but we can't forget to smile and laugh
Yeah.
and love and do the things that are really important. So,
Yeah.
or we all start sounding like Alex Jones at some point. Well,
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ricky. You're awesome, and I love your show, and I will see you again soon. Thank you.
absolutely. Take care.
Bye-bye.